Welcome to the Broncos podcast with Troy Renck. I'm your host, Troy Renck from the Denver Post. It is a wonderful day here in the metro. You can see I'm outside again, birds chirping. The sun is out. Spring is in full effect. You got baseball going on. Well, unfortunately, I don't want to bring up the Rockies, but you do have it going on. High school baseball. We just finished prep basketball state champions. Congrats to my Denver Run Devils for their first state title since '97. Really enjoyed spending time with that team this week. And now we got the NCAA tournament coming up here at Ball Arena. Going to have some fun games there. We will be out there. Let's be honest. March is still a time to talk Broncos. And the Broncos have had a terrific run in free agency. The Broncos are acting like the Broncos again. This isn't that class where they got DeMarcus Ware, Aqib Talib, Emmanuel Sanders, and T.J. Ward. It's not a free agent class, but this free agent haul has been impressive. And since the last pod, they signed tight end Evan Engram, the Joker. Essie, you can sleep now. The Loch Ness Monster has been found. So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to be joined by a new Denver Post Broncos writer. He teams up with Parker Gabriel. They are crushing it on the beat. That is Luca Evans. Luca came over to us from the Orange County Register, used to cover USC football. That's where I noticed his work first. Has already made a splash for us here at the Denver Post. So he will be joining us, talking about what the Broncos have done, what it means to get Ingram, what's left in free agency, and kind of shifting our eyes a little bit toward the draft and what needs do we expect them to address now that they've had such a productive free agency. So we'll talk to Luca, some of the stories he's written so far, get a chance to know him and talk Broncos. It's an exciting time to be a Broncos fan. We're not having to pretend and talk about a cringy quarterback or a C- signing and pretend it's a good thing, because the Broncos a really productive week plus in free agency. We're going to get to all of that after the break. Have you been hurt in a car wreck or injured at work? What are you waiting for? Give my friends at Hoggatt Injury Law a call. Their motto with us is personal. That's because it is. I've known Darby Hoggatt forever. We traveled the country watching our boys play travel baseball. We became good friends. Many of Darby's clients became his good friend because he's just that kind of guy. He's a good dude. You don't even have to pay Darby up front. If your case goes as planned, Darby will be the writing checks to you. So again, if you've been hurt in a car wreck or injured at work, give Darby's team a call. That's 1-833-HOGGATT, 1-833-HOGGAT, or visit the website at hoggattlaw.com. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for betting on all the madness. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. They have the largest selection of odds on everything from college hoops to a $200,000 bracket contest. BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every Cinderella story to every hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. Bet online, the game starts here. Welcome back to the Broncos Pod. I am Troy Renck, columnist for the Denver Post. I am pleased now to be joined by Luca Evans, our new Denver Post Broncos writer. He has already done just some fabulous work in his, what have you been here? It seems like, 15 days or so, a couple of weeks?
It's been a couple of weeks, hit the ground, hit real fast, right into free agency. But yeah, it's been a whirlwind.
So before we go Broncos, I want you to kind of tell people a little bit about yourself. You're a Chapman grad, so obviously you struggle with academics because that school's so easy to get into. I kid because I care. My son went to Westmont, my youngest, and Chapman we looked at for my oldest. That is no joke. It's a tough school. So kind of give us a little bit about your background, Luca, how you got to this point where you're working on the Post Broncos coverage with Parker.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to go to Chapman, and as so many folks in this industry do, just fell in love with this. Starting working at the student paper and just kept that going. Started freelancing for the LA Times, and eventually found my way to the USC beat at the Register. I've been there for a couple years and gotten to cover Caleb Williams and Juju Watkins and some great athletes and talent coming out of Southern California. So making the move over here, lucky enough to join the Broncos beat, and it's been real exciting so far.
Are you from SoCal? Is that where you were
I'm
born and
from
raised?
Northern California originally. Yeah.
Okay,
So grew up in the Bay Area. Mom's a
okay.
librarian. So grew up spending a lot of time reading. And I think that's probably naturally what led me down this path. But, so blame my mom. But that's, that's, that's all there is to it.
Yeah, well, we are lucky to have you. And again, you've made a splash so far. Let's talk about the big sign that I hadn't covered. It hadn't happened yet. It was kind of in limbo. The Evan Engram signing, the Joker. Sean Payton has talked about this position ad nauseum since he got here, and bringing up, Darren Sproles and Reggie Bush and Jeremy Shockey and all these different players. And he hasn't had even anyone closely resembling that in Denver. Take us through the Evan Engram signing, kind of how it ended up happening, because he goes to the Chargers and you think he's out of the building, he's gone. And what do you think that means for this Broncos offense with Sean Payton as the play caller?
Yeah, it was kind of in limbo for a couple days there, wasn't it? It was, you had the news of he was in Denver that Monday of free agency, and you think all goes well there and something progresses, but all quiet on that front, and then he ends up leaving the building without a contract being signed. Then news pops up that he's visiting the Chargers. So all of a sudden you have this, AFC West battle, kind of a tug of war for Evan Engram, and he ends up ultimately picking the Broncos, which, I mean, it's just going to be huge for Sean Payton's offense. I'm hopefully going to work on something on it this week, but 6'3", 240, I believe. He got 114 passes just a couple of years ago. Obviously coming off the injury issues a little bit last year, but I don't think Denver would have made that signing if they weren't confident in, his rehab from that torn labrum. So I think, giving just Bo Nix another kind of safety valve as well. That's what he was really good with for Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. And yeah, I think that's just going to be, it's going to potentially help take this offense to another level.
Yeah, with the Broncos country that's watched this team last year develop under Bo Nix, I mean, really his only third down target was Cortland Sutton. I mean, it was
Yeah.
so obvious on third down, the one guy he trusted, and Sutton had a nice year. Is he a superstar receiver? No, but he is very valuable to this team because of the way they used him. But they had no other options. They just did not control the middle of the field consistently. And every week we would have to listen to Sean Payton, who his press conferences for me still are brilliant. He'll answer any question. He's grumpy. He's moody. He can be, I mean, his default setting is to be an ass. But the reality is he answers all these questions, but he just trying to tell us and articulate that their tight end room is good enough. It wasn't. It was a bunch of spare parts with Adam Troutman, Nate Atkins, and Lucas Kroll. I mean, I think Kroll led him with 19 receptions, or maybe it was Troutman. I mean, it was just a ridiculously low number, other than the Colts, who I expect to take Tyler Warren in the draft. I don't think any tight end room was worse last year. The Broncos have been the worst the last two. So Engram, I see as a slot guy. And again, that's just a position they really haven't addressed where they can control that middle of the field. Your take on the contract, too, it looks like, and we'll get into the other ones as well, but it looks like they've protected themselves. Like this isn't someone with a credit card at 2 a.m. at the bar just waving around. It feels, yeah, you overspend some in free agency, but it doesn't feel reckless.
Yeah, and taking a look at the market, he obviously you need to get into guaranteed money and all that, but just looking at kind of the total value of the contract, he was paid the most of any tight end free agency in terms of per year money, but he was easily the best option on the market. And I think getting him for what they did 2 years, I think it was $23.5 million. I mean, you look at Juwan Johnson, the Saints signed him for 3 years and 30, and his best year last year, he caught 50 passes, and Evan Engram caught 47 in 9 games, and Juwan Johnson caught 50 in 17. So Evan Engram is easily the most proven name on the market. It was fairly thin. And I think he gives, Sean Payton has talked to about kind of that joker weapon as well, helping in red zone situations. And I think, they could potentially unlock him a little bit there. I don't think he's been a huge, touchdown red zone guy throughout his career, but I could see him definitely in that role. And you had the real winner of the GIF when he posted that Twitter post of Heath Ledger's Joker just cackling, no caption necessary. I thought that was awesome of him to just lean into that. So yeah.
Yeah, talk about a guy that gets it, and
Yeah.
and this is usually the portion of the program where we'd say, let's go to the press conference with Evan Engram. But Sean Payton has this weird thing where they sign free agents. They do not do press conferences. They talk briefly with Broncos media, the in-house media, for like 4 questions, and they post it on social media, and that's it. And you say, Troy, why do you know that so well? When I was in TV, you really like that sound. That sound can carry you for weeks at a press. I mean, you get a press conference with 3 different players. That's like a month's worth of sound until you get into minicamp. But they don't, and he leaned into it. He gets it, which I love. I'm a little biased about how he could work because of 2 things, Luca. In 2017, when Vance Joseph was still the coach, I hate to bring this up for Vince, it's a bad memory. The Giants come into town. The Broncos are doing well, and they have nobody on their team. They're like the Nuggets lineup they rolled out last night. 3 receivers out, top backs out. It's Eli Manning and Evan Engram, and then a bunch of guys I've never heard of. And Engram still goes for 5 and 82 and a touchdown. And then again in London, a few years ago, he had a touchdown against the Broncos. So, I mean, I've seen this guy, what he can do. So I just, again, even if he's just good, not great, it is such an upgrade over what they've had. I think when you're going to, and you're going to, as you talk about, if you're going to lean into the development of a young quarterback, you've got to put weapon around him. This will help Bo Nix. But it wasn't just Engram. We talked about the other 2. Give me your opinion on the 2 49ers, especially. Just wrote a huge story on the 49ers safety. If people haven't read it, go to the denverpost.com/sports Broncos to see the work on, and I'll have you pronounce his name because I'll screw it up. It's a background, and it's Talanoa
Hufanga. Yeah.
Go ahead and pronounce it for us, Luca.
Talanoa Hufanga.
Talanoa Hufanga.
I believe.
You got to read this story. You got to read this story about him growing up on a farm. But tell me your thoughts about those 2, and we'll start with Talanoa, because you just did a wonderful piece looking back at his time and growing up and talking to some of those who've been important in his life, including his high school coach.
Well, he's got a heck of a story. First off, I mean, it's been well documented, I think, back from his time in San Francisco. But he grew up on a farm in Oregon, on his parents' farm. His dad came over at one point, originally from Tonga, the island, and so his mom and his dad raised their kids on that farm, very kind of disciplined, with structure. One anecdote I didn't put in the story, but they made Talanoa and his brother put their phones in like a basket on their nightstand every night at 9 p.m. They didn't let them, have go on their phones before bed. Same thing if friends came over, they had to do the same thing too. So raised up and just kind of raised in a very disciplined household, and you kind of eventually saw it or see it the way that he plays the game. Very fearless, kind of a headhunter. He, was talking to one of his former teammates at USC, where he played for a few years, and he was like, he can play man, he can come down, play in the box, he can cover sideline to sideline, he can basically do everything. We saw it with the 49ers a couple of years ago. He was an all-pro, I think his 2nd year in the league, and then injury issues the past couple of years, which in part he had a torn ACL, which is a fluke thing, but he's always kind of had struggles with injuries, and in part, which that story delves into, it's just because of the way he plays the game with so much physicality and just fearlessness and how he attacks. But when you talk to people around him, you get the sense that he's going to be motivated coming into Denver. He's still just 25, 3 years, $45 million. Looks kind of like a lot for, a guy who's played 17 games total the past couple of years. But when you look at, again, the other guys on the market, a lot of deals in that same range, and none of them, I think, have the upside that he had in 22 with the 49ers. So the Broncos are kind of banking on that. And even if he's just, as you mentioned with Evan Engram, good, not great, it's still an upgrade for them. He also, and to get into Dre Greenlaw, but his Talanoa's high school coach, who talked to him on Monday after he made the decision, told me that he and Dre Greenlaw that's basically like his best friend, and they were locker mates in San Francisco. So they're bringing a little bit, certainly, of that chemistry over to Denver, and it sounded like that had for I don't know, for both of them or just for Talanoa, but had some level of influence in the decision, or at least feeling settled in, making the choice to come over.
Yeah, and Talanoa, you see it like these guys have won before. They've played in big
Yep.
games, and it's part of the reason they got Mike McGlinchey a couple years ago at right tackle. DJ Jones from San Francisco as well. Bring over that, part. You help build a culture, but you know what it looks like. It is so important in pro ball to what it looks like to win. It's not just enough to we had a good practice. What are you doing after practice? What do your meetings look like? What does that chemistry look like where you care about the guy next to you? And the more guys they bring in that have won, I've seen it there. You've seen it change the span of 2 years where they've cleaned out about 80% of the locker room. The only guys surviving are Cortland Sutton and Garrett Bowles, really, in terms of guys you think about from 2-3 years ago. But Drake Greenlaw, you bring him up, and I've mentioned this on this pod. This was before your time, but covered the Super Bowl 50 team, and that was the last time they had a sideline to sideline linebacker with Danny Trevathan.
Yep.
They called Danny T a huge lion tattoo, like they symbolize who he was. He roamed sideline to sideline, king of the jungle type mentality. And he and Brandon Marshall were really good. They just haven't had that since. It's hurt them in coverage. It's hurt them on third down. And now, again, they were a good defense last year. Vance Joseph has earned the right to be a head coach again in this league, given the way that defense played last year. He saved their ass multiple times as Bo Nix was gaining traction. But he's never had weapons like this. And when I had texted with Vance, he had told me about both of them, Talanoa and Dre, like it's all about fit and how the vision you have for these players. But it sounds like, and I'm sure in your reporting and talking to people, Dre almost left. Like the Niners tried to talk him out of it. Everyone's like, well, they're just trying to get rid of everyone. I don't know how hard, they tried to keep Talanoa, but it's very clear they identified a core and didn't want to lose Greenlaw. So what a snag by the Broncos. And especially because as it relates to maybe it was why they got Talanoa as well, right?
Yeah, I haven't. Eventually, I'll be working on something on Dre, but I just talked to his agent last night a little bit about how it came together, and they identified the Broncos pretty early on as a team that checked all of his boxes. Was a guy who, from talking to them, like, obviously it's always about money in some context, but it wasn't, he's not searching for the biggest payout. He's searching for things that'll check off. And when you look at his background, that does make sense. And I do buy into that. But the Niners they did want him back. I think Schefter reported, I forget what it was, but he reported yesterday that they made a pretty big push to get him back. And I can confirm that. But they wanted him. And, I think really the question with him is just whether, he's the same guy in 22 and 23 that we saw with the 49ers, because if he is, obviously coming off the Achilles injury, he did have a game. The 2 games, looks a little shaky when you think about his contract, but I think he came back against the Rams and had like 8 or 9 tackles and 30 snaps or something like that. And so at one point last year, but I saw a stat when the Broncos signed him. I think it was from NFL's Next Gen Stats that I think it was in 23, no linebacker in the league had the lowest or had a lower expected receptions against, like in coverage, from guys that they were matched up against. And so at his best, he's a really good linebacker in coverage. And to your point, I think they have been missing that. And that was something that, again, not being on the beat last year, but reading into things, seemed to hurt them a little bit at times, or was an issue that they needed to address. And they certainly did that.
Yeah. And the other thing I like, and to your point, yeah, against the Chargers twice and the Ravens specifically, they got worked in the middle of the field, where the absence of a linebacker to be able to cover and allow the safeties to move around, it really was a glaring issue in those 3 games specifically. But this guy will also light you up like the Vegas Strip. I mean, he plays with a physicality. I mean, he knocks people down. He plays with energy. He plays with passion. I see Broncos fans falling in love with him right away. And he's a leader. He's going to come in. I don't know what, Alex Singleton is as well, but he's coming off ACL. And you mentioned that Rams game. I watched that Rams game, and that's a notable game because the guy that replaced him during the year, he started, and then that's the game that linebacker quit because
Yeah.
Greenlaw, he cramped up in his Achilles. He had to come out, and the other guy refused to go in. So they sent him to the locker room, and they cut it. And that's why I remember that game, because it revolved around Greenlaw. He was back, looked like himself, but then he had to come out, and the other guy wouldn't go in. He refused to go in. I can't remember his name. I know they ended up cutting him. But Greenlaw, his last 2 games, he looked a lot like the player I saw in 2023. And if he's healthy, he is a huge upgrade. So you get Greenlaw, you get Talanoa, you get Engram. Now what's left? What's left? I know they need a punter. I don't have one on the roster, but do we see any activity left? What would you say would be the priorities remaining as we get into the second and third waves of free agency, Luca?
Yeah, I think it's definitely still possible. They obviously at some level got in on the Cooper Cup sweepstakes, or there were some ties there. Obviously, I think the price range, as we've reported, or at least speculated, might have been a little bit out of the Broncos, what they would have paid for him. But I do think it's still possible that they look for veteran receiver help. The market's pretty clogged at the moment. There's a lot more, just talking to agents, there's a lot more supply than there is demand. And so it'll be interesting to kind of see how that plays out. There's a fair amount of names still left who are probably going to land places on 1-year deals. And I think I'm not entirely sure off the top. I can't remember if Talanoa Hufanga's contract details, if we have those yet, but Broncos don't have a ton left in terms of cap space to work with. And so if they're going to get someone, it's going to be, a veteran guy for pretty cheap. And that's out there. I just think that'll take a little bit of time to materialize if they do choose to go in that direction versus looking into the draft. It's also still possible maybe they go after maybe a little help or depth at cornerback, maybe interior D-line. We'll see. But I think they have to look draft for a running back at this point. There's really, no major help left on the market. So that's kind of the big thing that I look ahead to April for.
Yeah, it is starting to become very obvious, almost like it did with Bo Nix last year in quarterback. Like it just feels like they're leaning, and the gravitational pull to take a running back is growing. Yeah, people ask me about, I know from talking to multiple sources, like, listen, they like Cup, but in an ideal world, they hope maybe his market's depressed and he signs a 1-year $5 million, maybe good. They were never going to be in on him at anything approaching his market value. And once he got to 15, good for him. I think that's an insane contract for a guy who's had as many injuries. And I love the guy. But he, again, just like with Deebo Samuel, people have this vision because they play fantasy football. Deebo and Cooper have not been the same player since 2021. They both average about 750 yards and 6 touchdowns. That's not what you want to pay 15, 16 million for. Right, not when you're coming out of college, covering college, where they produce so many of these receivers. The guys you're going to pay top end have to be a dude, like a number one clear, unless you're one piece away from the Super Bowl. Like I get it then, where you're like, okay, this is that one piece of the puzzle we need. But at running back, they got to get better. We love Javonte Williams. We love the story. It was bad last year. He was probably the worst starting running back in the league. He's great in pass pro, great on third down pass pro. We get that. But that needs to be his role. And so you have Audric Estime returning, Jaleel McLaughlin, Tyler Bidet. But I want him to get someone that can beat them all out. And I think Omarion Hampton can be that guy. And Daniel Jeremiah's latest mock, he mocks Hampton to the Broncos. My concern is that if Genty goes 5 or 6, let's say Genty goes to the Raiders, then I could see the Cowboys taking Hampton at 12. And then what? And that's where it gets interesting. Do they stay on the board at that position? With the Caleb, I can't think, is it Jones Johnson, the kid from Iowa? He doesn't profile as well for a Sean Payton in terms of the way he uses backs, but they go there. They go Trayvon Henderson, Junkins, both the kids from Ohio State. I mean, it's a little reach for certainly Junkins at 20, but do they stay there? go tight end. I don't think they'd go tight end at 20. They go best safety on the board. So if Hampton's not available, it gets pretty interesting, doesn't it, Luca?
Yeah, it does. And I think at that point, I honestly don't think it makes sense to reach for, in talking to draft analysts, Ashton Genty and Amari Hampton are kind of in their own tier, and maybe
Right.
some guys view Ashton Genty is in his own tier, and then Amari a little bit below him. But beyond that, there is just kind of a glut of guys, and I don't think it makes sense necessarily. I don't know how they view Caleb Johnson or Dylan Sampson even from Tennessee, but I don't think it makes sense to just reach for one of those guys in the first round out of desperation because they need the best guy off, on the board. There's really strong talent that they can wait on in the second round and the third round at that point. Travion Henderson, again, maybe he creeps up a little bit. Maybe he falls second, third round. You can look at him. You can look at Devin Neal from Kansas. There's a lot of quality guys in this draft. Just depends on, Ashton Genty and Amari Hampton are that kind of sure thing day one, 3-down back that you can, plug in and project instantly as your starter. The rest of the guys are, don't necessarily know if you have that right away from day one. So if they want one of those guys, it certainly probably not out of the realm of possibility that they would trade up for him. But there's also, I think maybe they go even receiver in that first round, Tetero McMillan or what have you. I just
Yeah,
I think it
that'd
would.
be interesting. The kid from you saw him in person, right? A couple times.
Yeah, he's insane. He's legit, and I don't think I don't know. I don't have the context into. I mean, he's not necessarily a speed guy. I think the 40 time was a little slower than people were expecting. I think Albert Breer had it in 4.5s or something like that. But the body control, the catch radius, the athleticism, he's just he's special, and so I definitely. I mean, be a huge target for Bo Nix. But I don't know how hard they would look receiver at 20.
Yeah, Luther Burden has come up as well. I like him
Yep.
as a slot guy, but Sean Payton has a type. He has a type. Like all his receivers outside of Mims are all like they look like basketball players. 6'2", 6'3",
Yep.
215. Like they're the same guy. I mean, so that's what the kid from Arizona. I mean, could
Yep.
make sense. Again, I'd be a little surprised they go receiver 1, just because again you can get receivers later in the draft. But I like that kid. He worked CU a couple different times. He's a big target, and again, that's the kind of player Sean Payton likes. Safety could come into play there if Stark dropped, if the kid from South Carolina. I mean, they're going to have some options. I'll be honest. I'll be disappointed if it's not Hampton at this point, having watched him and having watched the Broncos and watched him and seeing how they could marry the two. Again, and they could get Henderson maybe at 51 or Judkins at 51, and it might turn out fine. Hampton for me is Deuce McAllister, who Sean Payton had years ago. He's that kind of back that can run for 1,000 yards and catch 40 balls and play 3 downs. And I'm not saying he's a superstar, but they absolutely have to get more dynamic running the ball. They're just not good enough at it. And that's like the missing piece for this team when you look at it going forward. So I guess what do you got coming up next in the Post? I want you to sell some of that for us. Again, if you joined us late, this is Luca Evans. He has joined the Post earlier this month. Our good friend Ryan McFadden now covers the Raiders for ESPN. Ryan was fantastic working with Parker, and Luca is already right in with my man Parker Gabriel, where again, I don't know where you would get better Broncos coverage. I'm part of it on game days, and I help out, but I'm a columnist. Those two guys do the work. They're in there every day, sleeves rolled up, grinding. And with Luca and Parker, you're going to see not only nuts and bolts and all that, but just brilliant writing. If you love reading, and the reason I got into this business is to write in ways that I would want to read. And Luca, you write that way. You write in a way that I want to read your copy And so it's very obvious when I read you at covering USC, but even more so now on the Broncos, why they wanted so desperately to hire you, and we got lucky to get you. So what do you got coming up? I know it's a busy time here as we get more and more into the draft. I know you'll be heavy in that draft coverage, but before that, you probably got other piece. I think you mentioned Greenlaw.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the kind words. Firstly, I'm really happy to be here and be on the beat. I still feel like I'm trying to get up to speed with everything, but I first thing gonna be most likely doing a story on Evan Engram this week, and the little bit of the background, a little bit of how he might fit into this Sean Payton's offense, what it means for him to have the Joker role. So look out for that. Definitely Dre Greenlaw at some point in the future here, whenever we get that on the budget. Really love doing these kind of in-depth, features and telling the story of who guys are and that sort of thing. So if you like that, feel free to follow along, because I love doing those kinds of pieces. And so, but yeah, those two. Obviously, we're gonna have some draft stuff, and gonna be trying to figure out, where the Broncos are interested and that sort of thing leading up to April. And then a whole lot of other, I think they're throwing me on NCAA tournament stuff and maybe some Nugget stuff. And so I'll be a little bit of a joker myself the next couple of months for us. So yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I'll see you out there at NCAA this week. I believe you and
Yes,
I
sir.
overlap a day. I'll be out there Thursday, Friday. It appears now, and then certainly at Nuggets. Nuggets last night was an inspiring win. That's what defense actually looks like when you care and you try hard. Maybe it sends a message, without Brown, without Jokic, without Murray, and those three are really good players. And Jokic is, should be MVP or he'll be second. Those three have struggled defensively. Last night, you saw a team that actually cared. I mean, when Michael Malone comes to the podium and says, I have to try to beg these guys to play hard, not a great sign. But maybe last night they turned a corner with that. The playoffs, there's something else, man, at Ball Arena for those Nuggets and Avs games. So I know you will enjoy that.
Yeah.
And then there's nothing like a Broncos Sunday, man. There's nothing like it. Broncos country, the vibe, the everything, the energy, and the fact that they're relevant again. You're landing here at the right time, Luca.
Yeah, I know. I'm jumping on right at the right time, I think. So we'll see where the season goes, but I really appreciate you having me, Troy.
You got, again, that's Luca Evans from the Denver Post. You can read all his stuff at denverpost.com/sports Broncos. He and Parker Gabriel hold it down on the beat, and I provide columns here and there. But you can read Luca. He will be doing in-depth features, the enterprise work, nuts and bolts. He's just a very versatile reporter. So, Luca, thanks so much for joining the show. I will cross paths with you soon this week at NCAA Hoops.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Troy. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
You got it, my friend. All righty, folks. That's going to do it. I could not do this show without Big A behind the screen and Mile High Sports. Big A, we don't know how long we have you, and I'm not going to break that, but he has been the best to me. And if it weren't for him, I wouldn't be able to do this wonderful thing on YouTube. Nate Lundy, Mile High Sports, Bet Online, and of course, A1 from day one. Hoggatt at Hoggatt Injury Law. Broncos country. I do this pod for you. Happiness begins with me. Go out there and have a great day.